All right, welcome back to Become a Calm Mama, and I'm already laughing. I'm Darlene Childress. I'm your life and parenting coach and the host of this podcast. And I'm already sort of laughing about this episode because I can tell it might be a rant, which I'm not even sure I've ever done an episode that's like kind of ranty or, you know, where I'm just like on fire and I have a lot to say, but I have a lot to say right now. I feel a little bit fired up because the last couple of weeks I've read a few different headlines that have really got me mad. So the first one that I read was from the LA Times, and it was like kind of the end of March. And it says, the headline is, Millennials gave birth to Generation Alpha. Are these kids already doomed? Okay. Oh my gosh. It goes on to have like a note that says, I need to ask millennials, why are your kids so awful? Okay. And then I read another headline, and this is from Scary Mommy, and it was just this past week, which actually, so it was the mid-April, because this episode's going to come out in mid-May. But the headline was, a teacher says the problem with kids today is a parenting problem. And I see these headlines all the time, and I'm just really upset because the moms I know, the moms I work with, the moms like you who are listening to this podcast, the moms and dads who are really working hard at parenting their kids and spend a lot of time and energy investing in their parenting, are then being blamed for like every societal ill. And both of these articles say, you know, a parenting problem or like millennials. But we all know that most of the time parenting is mostly about the mom, right? Like I know that dads parent. I'm not, you know, trying to ignore or discount the contribution that dads or other co-parents make, but primarily the mother is making decisions about, you know, education and learning about different philosophies and, you know, talking to the doctors and making the appointments and figuring out enrichment and even choosing schools and things like that. You're talking about it with your co-parent, but most of the time you're making the decisions. So also as women and as moms, we tend to think that like the children and their behavior is a result of like us. So we already internalize that this is our job to have quote unquote good kids. And then we read these types of headlines and it's like, okay, I'm doing everything I can. I'm spending all this time, all this energy, all this focus, all this money. And you're still telling me that I'm fucking up? Like, what? And it can be so discouraging. And I just want to frame this conversation because I don't think these issues are a parenting problem. I don't think that the issues, if we are even having issues, we can talk about that, but some of the things that are happening with kids in school or in, you know, public settings, the quote unquote problems with behavior and young kids is much less about parenting itself, but more of our society and the situations that we are experiencing as a culture. So it's interesting because this first, the Scary Mommy one about the teacher, the reason why this article came up is because a Penn State study, found that teachers are leaving their jobs at higher rates than nurses and police officers. That 23% of teachers left their school in 2023. So that's the stat that is creating this conversation. And then this one teacher who has 24 years of experience, Lisa Consolatory, goes on TikTok and says that the problem is that we have raised children to think that they are absolutely the most important person in the room. This is a quote. They are so special that whatever they want to do or whatever they think or whatever they say is the most important thing in that moment. And she says, you know, no one is ever the most special person in the room at any time. Nobody is, because we live in a society and we all have to get along and we have to respect one another. And part of respecting one another is recognizing when you have a contribution to make and when you need to sit and open your ears. And she's like, we've missed that. And then is, holding parents responsible for classroom behavior. But it's funny because she went on to say, let's reevaluate our family culture, our community culture, and our larger society culture, because this is not working. Now, I agree with Lisa Consolatory, revered teacher for 25 years, that we do have some issues that might be impacting our children. And maybe some of it is permissive parenting, possibly, maybe an overindulgence in terms of emotional coaching. But I think most of it has to do with just the almost existential stress and burnout culture we have. That the thing that parents are coping with is like, we're saying, oh, kids aren't okay. Kids are a mess. Well, parents are also a mess. Adults are a mess. We're living in a society that's very, very overwhelming. And it feels like there's a lot of pressures on mom. Well, there's a lot of pressures on moms and dads to make money and have a nice house and have well-behaved kids, while also give them all the opportunities so that they can get ahead and, have advantages so they can get in college. And we have like this, preschool to college, funnel, right? Where it's like we have to start now in order to prepare them to get into good colleges. And so there's just a lot of pressure. And then we have our kids, and there's the pressure of, emotional coaching them while also allowing for big feelings. That is hard. The type of parenting that we are trying to do is challenging. It requires more bandwidth than we normally would need to parent kids, because in the past you just be like, stop it, shut down their feelings, shame them, and get them to listen. And none of us want to do that. Even teachers don't want to do that. So we're all in this experimental stage of raising kids without using fear and shame and trying to figure it out. That's why I talk a lot about setting boundaries and following through without shame, but actually following through with consequences, so that you can give your kids both the emotional coaching piece and the personal responsibility piece so that they can go thrive in society. But that requires you to be calm. It requires that you don't feel overwhelmed and not stressed and all of that, right? Because we can't give what we don't have. We can't coach our kids through their big feelings when we're overwhelmed. And if we have consequences and we set limits and we have consequences, our kids are going to get mad. They're going to have big feelings. And we have to have the bandwidth to manage yet again another meltdown. So I feel like the idea that all the problems in today's society are because of parenting, or parents being lazy, or, not paying attention, or, too permissive. It's like, no, that's not what I'm seeing in my practice. And, listening to you guys talk to me who are on the podcast and, who reach out to me, it's like, you're really working at it and trying to figure out how to do it in a way that isn't shaming and paining, right? So the other thing, like the new LA Times article was really interesting to me, because they're like, it's like, okay, Generation Alpha is kids born between roughly 2010 and the end of 2024. So that kind of, era. So like my kids are Gen Z because they were born in 04 and 06. But then if you have a kid who is under 14, they are Gen Alpha. So 2010 to now, to end of 24. So there's a quote, the quote from the article, from the LA Times article. There are already concerns that the kids aren't all right. They're wildly being called feral, illiterate, and doomed on YouTube and TikTok. And then the article goes on to say, blame bad parenting by millennials or tech companies or both. Okay. blame parenting or tech companies. Like, this is a huge difference, right? Like, we as parents, we have no control over tech companies and the decisions that they make. And we also, as parents, had no control over a pandemic, over the fact that schools shut down, that preschools were hard to access. And this idea in the article goes on to talk about like the evidence that it uses to talk about how kids aren't okay. And one of the major, measurements that this article uses is illiteracy, and, blaming parents for illiteracy. And it's like, wait a second. For one, it's always been kind of the job of the schools to teach kids how to read. We supplement and reinforce by reading to our kids and practicing and singing the alphabet and, doing some things. But really, like, our whole system is based on outsourcing education to an educational system. We pay for it with our tax-paying dollars or with our private school dollars. And parents go to work, or they take care of their homes, or they take care of younger children. We have a system in our society that says, hey, parents, guess what? We're going to take over this aspect of child rearing called education. But during the pandemic, the school system was like, actually, no. I know we have a contract, like a social contract that schools handle education, but we're going to just change that contract and have kids stay home and you be in charge of making sure that they learn how to read while you're working, while you're handling a global pandemic, while you have younger kids at home, while you have multiple kids at home. Like, it was cuckoo and it was ineffective. And now we're in the result of that time period. So if you think about kids, kids who were born in 2019, they're 5 now. That means the first 2+ years they experienced at home only. So they weren't being socialized. They weren't having play dates. They weren't doing like little mommy and me classes. Kids who are 7 now, they were like 4 or, during when the lockdown hit. And so they also didn't go to preschool. It's like, what did we think was going to happen when we shut down society for 18 months in some places like Los Angeles or other big cities? What did we think was going to happen to our kids? Of course, there's going to be delay. There's going to be, consequences of that massive decision. And now that we're in that consequence, it's like, oh, it's parents' fault. I don't like it. That's why I'm kind of ranty, because like, it's not really fair. And we've also blamed parents for overusing the iPad or overusing devices. That's another part of this article in the LA Times. It's like, quote unquote, the iPad kid is a child who cannot sit through a restaurant meal or a brief ride on the bus or whatever without mainlining YouTube from a tablet in a plastic case. That is a quote from this article. And it's like, okay, so these kids were at home, stuck at home with working parents. They were doing school online, so on tablets. Literally, the school gives you a tablet. They give you a Chromebook or they give you an iPad or whatever it is. And then they say, it's your fault that your kids really like the iPad. It's your fault that when your kids are in my classroom, they're bored because they're so used to being on the iPad. Is there some truth to the fact that maybe you need better screen time rules? Maybe. But we can't blame an entire generation of parents for a societal issue where there's just so much programming designed for children. It's easy to access. You have parents who are overworked, overstressed, and not great childcare. We don't have access to easy childcare. We are in an economic migration period of time where people are migrating away from their parents and their extended family in order to look for work. So people are leaving where they grew up in order to go to cities and things like that so they can get help, like so they can make money. So we have these like big issues. We have financial issues. We have, economic pulls. We have tech issues that are coming into our family. And as a society, we are struggling. And we cannot take a macro problem, a societal problem, a cultural issue, and turn it into a personal problem, an individual. This is because of individual parents. It's not fair. It's just not. I keep thinking about how, like, are our kids over reliant on iPads or on tech? I don't know, over reliant is a strong word. But it is true. If your kid spends a lot of time outside of school in an environment where they get to play on their iPad a lot or watch TV a lot or, watch all these fun shows and YouTube and things like that, those are designed to be very easily digested, right? They're like candy for the kids, right? Just like it's easy and they crave it. They want it. And when they get it and they have access to it very easily, then that means at school they have harder time paying attention because it's not as exciting. They haven't trained their brain for boredom. They haven't trained their brain for discomfort. They haven't trained their brain for long periods of, listening because the stories are built, for a shorter attention span. So yes, that is true. But then you look at a parent and parents are asking me and they're asking other professionals, how much time should my kid have on the iPad? What, Darlene, tell me, is it okay for them to use it before school? Is it okay for them to use it after school? Should I put limits on it? Should I only have them do it on the weekends? And I, of course, have some ideas of what I think is a good rhythm and a healthy system, but I would never want to tell a busy, working single mom of 3 kids that she can't use an iPad while she makes dinner and helps her 5th grader with homework. Because she's in a system that is so overwhelming that just puts more pressure on her. So we do need better guidelines, but we also need better support so that people can actually put those into place. When I teach limits in my programs, I often will talk about capacity. Like, how much capacity do you have to follow through on this routine or this limit? Because in parenting, it's not just saying no, it's handling your kid's big feeling cycle when you say no, when they get upset. And whenever you set a limit, your kid is going to have thoughts and feelings about it. That's just how it works. And now in an older system, a traditional system, if you're like, hey, cut it out, no crying, shut that down. I don't want to hear it. That's enough. Don't talk back. You're being disrespectful. If you shut all that down, then sure, your kid will probably not have a big feeling cycle. But we are trying to live in a society or to build a society where it's okay to express your emotion. But then that means you need to have someone who's around to hear it. And that's hard. So I'm ranting because I just want you as the listener of this podcast, especially it's called Become a Calm Mama. So it's like, here's another thing I've got to do. I just want you to do your best. I used to go to this workout class a long time ago, and there was this woman, she only taught on Sunday mornings, and she would set us up with an exercise. And then right before we started to do the exercise ourselves, she'd say, do your best. And I think about it all the time. I want you to have goals, ideals, in a perfect world, my kid would would watch TV these days at this amount of time, and then build towards that with giving yourself lots of compassion and lots of grace and lots of love. What doesn't help is being told, it's your fault society is messed up. It's your fault your kid isn't being well behaved. It's we're all together responsible for raising this next generation. Not one little silo family of 4 or whatever, or a mom and 2 kids. Enough. If we don't want kids to be oversaturated with iPads and do so much education, then the schools can stop giving them Chromebooks. The schools can stop using these tools for school because all they do is create problems for the families. If we want to change the way our kids interact with TikTok and YouTube and not have them be saturated, then we need to start making pledges as a whole society that we don't give kids phones until they're in 8th grade. Wait until 8th is a idea that people are playing with. We don't let kids drive cars until they're 16. We don't let kids drink alcohol till they're 21. We have, as a society, in the past decided rules that things are okay for grown-ups and things aren't okay for kids. We have figured out, we have solved problems in the past as a group, as a society. So it's so much easier when you're in a community of people who are like, we don't, like at school, we don't let phones come to school. Or we don't use iPads or whatever it is, Chromebooks and things like that. At the beginning of this school year, my son is a senior in high school. I went to open house, my last back to school night of my life. And one of the teachers who teaches seniors said to the group of parents, there weren't very many of us there because obviously seniors, but he said, I am not doing a lot of online work anymore because I found that I could not stop the cheating, but I also found that at least if you need to copy something, like if you copy from your friend with your, print it on a piece of paper, there's some sort of transference of information. But if you cut and paste, you're not getting anything. He said also, I don't like it that I don't interact with the student. I never hand them back their work. I don't have a piece of paper they give me and then that I give back to them. There's no transaction here. So he said, I'm making them have paper that they turn into me, that I grade it like I used to, teacher of 25 years, and then I hand it back to them and they can see my remarks. And he said, we're going back to a less digital experience in education because they found it's not really healthy. So it's like we have technology, but it doesn't necessarily need to be for kids. And it doesn't need to be an individual choice. We need to make choices at the educational level, at the government level, in communities. I feel like I have to just exhale. But I do really want you to notice when you see articles like this and headlines that blame parents, that you check in with yourself and you think, wait a second, is this valid? Is this an actual parenting issue? And how would you know? Because are we really surveying how parents are actually parenting? Or is this more of a societal issue that someone is trying to find a scapegoat for? You do not have to be society's scapegoat. Women are constantly, accused of or being held responsible for everything. It's like if you experience abuse, if you experience, assault, it's like, oh, what were you wearing? Did you see any of the red flags? It's like, why is it your responsibility? It should be the person who is the assaulter. It's their job to be held accountable for their actions. I'm just kind of sick of it. I'm sick of women being blamed. I'm sick of moms being blamed. I'm sick of being the scapegoat for societal ills. It's not right. It's not okay. And, I don't have an answer necessarily. I guess I had some in this episode, but, for you as the individual, I want you to just do your best and be okay with it. And if you are struggling and you're overwhelmed and you cannot make heads or tails of this parenting thing, get help. Come hang out in my programs. Book a consult with me. Let's talk about it. Let me give you some guidelines or some support or some freedom, some permission to relax. The other thing I guess I'll just leave you with is that I feel like they've been saying this stuff about kids for like every generation says this about the generation that's coming up. And it's like every generation figures it out and finds their way and becomes more responsible as they have more responsibility. And we can just trust the big picture. It's like, I don't know, Gen Z is lovely. Millennials are lovely. Gen X is lovely. We were like the slackers. We were told we were never going to accomplish anything. And it's like, I don't know. We built the internet and like made a lot of great content. So I think we're pretty cool. I think millennials are amazing. You guys taught us how to do social media, how to connect through the internet. Gen Z is figuring out how to, use these platforms in totally unique new ways, how to communicate in totally different ways, breaking down barriers around, gender and just society. It's great. Every generation has something to offer and every generation has something to struggle with. It is not parents' faults. It's the way that society works. It's the way that history moves forward. So you can just ignore anything you ever see that's like, parents, what's wrong with you today? And just keep listening to this podcast and applying what you learn as much as you can. This episode is coming out right after Mother's Day. And I feel like this is like almost like my Mother's Day gift to you. It's like, you know what? Everybody else can just quiet down. Just quiet down. We're doing fine over here. Parents are doing fine. Thank you. We're doing our best and letting that be okay. All right. If you hated this rant, tell me because I won't do one again. If you loved it, tell me because then I don't know. I'm just kind of curious. All right. I will come right back at you next week with some really actionable strategies as I'm always doing and giving you some really great content. But for this week, do your best. All right. Talk to you next time. Hey mama, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, I want to encourage you to do two things. The first is go to my website, calmmamacoaching.com, and get a copy of the Stop Yelling cheat sheet. You'll get a step-by-step breakdown of the most important tool I teach, which is the pause break. And you'll also get 40 ideas to reset your body and balance your nervous system so you don't have to yell at your kids. You can get a copy of that, again, at my website, calmmamacoaching.com/stop yelling. The other thing I'd love for you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this podcast so that other moms can discover empowering and helpful, practical parenting strategies just like you did today. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. It means a lot to be in your ear every week and to support you on your parenting journey.